What's the scariest thing you've ever done? Have you been shark diving? Maybe you've jumped out of a plane, hopefully with a parachute. Some of you may have been rock climbing. Has anyone wrestled a bear? Last summer, Gus decided to be dropped from a very high place in King's Dominion. I had him check with his mom first. Now, I wrestled with allowing him to do it, but decided that it was probably safe. Maybe not the best judgment, but it was fun. Maybe the thing you've done that was really scary had more to do with a presentation you had to make, like giving a speech or an argument at a debate. Is public speaking scary for you? My first time teaching junior high Bible was in a juvenile prison. I was shaking so bad that you could hear the paper I was holding rattling like a tambourine. Maybe you're terrified of confrontation. I can understand this one. Paul says to speak the truth in love. God does not always call you to confrontational encounters, though sometimes he does. Will you follow him when he calls you to speak and when he calls you to wait? I had another experience in a prison that was a bit scary. When I was 23, I did some one-on-one counseling in the maximum security building of a juvenile prison. This guy I had been counseling asked me to meet with a Muslim guy he met in the prison. The guard took us to an empty room and locked the door. There was a table with a phone on it and 3 chairs in the room. The guard quickly returned to the room, grabbed the phone and removed the cable from the phone, and then left. I thought to myself, what did this guy do that makes that cord so dangerous? What have I gotten myself into? I was scared, but I wanted the opportunity to speak for Jesus in this context. It ended up being a good conversation, and I believe I spoke boldly about Jesus. No punches were thrown, thank God. Today, we are finally at the step we call the Great Nation. Don't forget that this is only half of the promise given to Abraham. The second half is still 1,000 years off, and the road to that promise is difficult. The great nation Israel reaches greatness during the rule of King David and his son Solomon. It lasts only around 120 years before this greatness diminishes, though Israel remains a significant regional power for several more centuries. In today's story, we will look at how David's character is developed. Are there aspects of David's life that show us what pleases God? Like Saul, David has to try to honor God when the risks and the costs are very high, when it's scary. Sometimes it requires him to be in physical danger. Other times it requires speaking truth in love, even when Saul will not hear it. Sometimes honoring God just means waiting. For David, perhaps the scariest thing is not so much the battles, but the waiting. God, like he often does, is taking his time with David, and waiting can be agonizing, especially when you want to be faithful in the waiting. We're going to take a break from our overview for a number of weeks to focus on David. You see, David is called a man after God's own heart, and this is no minor thing to say about a person. God is pleased with David. But as we look at David, we also see a man who makes many horrible mistakes. Many seem as bad or worse than Saul's mistakes. Making mistakes is not what God is referring to when he says he is pleased with David. What sets David apart? Can we discern what it is? What is your desire? Is it to be a person that God is pleased with? If so, look closely at David's heart. Over the coming weeks, can you learn how to follow his example, even when it's scary? One thing that helps with the scary things we face is knowing that we have others who accept us and have our backs even when everything else lets us down. Maybe you can share what scares you in your groups. Maybe you can help each other find the courage and patience to be like David.